guys, it's Quana back again with another This Is Us review. Hope you guys are doing awesome. As you can see, I got a little bit of sunlight going on here because it is Wednesday morning. I was not able to record my This Is Us recap and review last night because my eyes were red from crying the entire night. And I feel like that's just going to be on brand for the next two episodes as we get steadily closer to the end of this very beautiful series that we've gotten to take part in. And hopefully you guys have been enjoying my recaps and reviews of the episode. Not only did I rewatch just so that I could take notes because I just knew that last night was a mess. One of the things I noticed last night as I was live tweeting is just everyone's very polarizing opinions about this family meeting that the Pearsons were having. And I felt like everyone was kind of, taking sides. And in the rewatch, I saw a lot of things that the writers were doing that I think if we as fans aren't careful, we'll miss them. So hopefully I got most of those things, those little subtle nuances, and I'm going to try to bring those into the conversation, but briefly. So before we get started, if you haven't done so already, please click the subscribe button. Give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to comment down below. That part of this show is the fact that we all get to be family for at least one night a week, and so I look forward to hearing from you guys in the comments. So let's get into season 6 episode 16, family meeting. And I do, like I said, I have notes. I have lots of notes. So this episode picks up exactly 1 week after Miguel's death, but it begins with a flashback that I just thought this is so apropos for it being the week after Mother's Day weekend, where we're witnessing Rebecca waking up in the middle of the night to take care of the babies. And there's a motif in the episode of her not really being able to get enough sleep, constantly being woken up, and really creating magic for her kids, always just being a constant for them. The one constant that they've always had is Rebecca, and that connects to this episode in so many levels. It flips from her taking care of them as babies to a little Kate waking up because she's had a bad dream about gremlins. Y'all, I don't know, the 80s were wild. I don't know if you were 80s babies like I was, but Gremlins, Ghoulies, there were just all of these horror movies, and for whatever reason, I don't know why, but they aired on regular TV. If you were lucky enough to have cable, those were things that you saw once they came onto cable. And I was traumatized. Freddy Krueger, Jason, Gremlins 2. The Gremlins looked real wild in Gremlins 2. It was a traumatizing time growing up in the 80s, so I could sympathize with little Kate. But one of the things that they're doing is not just showing us Rebecca taking care of them, but through each stage kind of seeing the big three's personalities and how they relate to Rebecca playing out. Kate is the one who's afraid. She wakes up her brothers. They go to Rebecca. Later on, when they are out at a party and Kevin gets Kate drunk, Randall is the one who steps in and takes care of some young men who are speaking very unfavorably and attempting to coerce his sister into, some very harmful situations. And he gets into an altercation with them, and he kind of takes care of his siblings. And then Kevin, for so much of his life, was the one who was just kind of out there doing his own thing. And then in his teen years, kind of causing some trouble. I will say I was glad that we got a chance to see teenage / young adult big three again. We've had so many of the younger actors kind of not be showcased in these last 4 or 5 episodes. So it was really good to see when Niles Finch popped up as a young Randall to get Rebecca to sign that permission slip at 4 a.m. My kids, right before we walked out the door, were like, oh, we need book fair money. It's 2022. I don't have cash. So here we are trying to hightail it to school so we could stop at a ATM so I can get money for them to go to the book fair. Kids just always come at you with things at the most inopportune times, I tell you. So I definitely could relate to Rebecca throughout this whole episode. I think that montage was just a great little nod to Mother's Day and to the sacrifices that moms make all the time. But then it transitions after the title card to like utter heartbreak as Rebecca wakes up and she's calling out for Miguel and he's not there. First round of tears immediately. Like as soon as I heard her say like Miguel's name like the third time, I was done for. I will say it's a little interesting. The nurse's aide called her Mrs. Pearson. And I feel like there have been other moments as well. It's kind of understandable when in relation to her kids, she might be called Mrs. Pearson, but I'm almost positive that when she was going to her doctor's visits, she was referred to as Mrs. Rivas. And so the fact that like her husband just died, she's calling for her husband and she refers to her as her name of her first husband. I thought that was an interesting thing. I don't know if that was just something that they didn't catch. And you know, if the actress being familiar with the show is aware of the characters and if they just didn't catch it in post or if that was like intentional. I think that's a question that fans have had for a while, whether or not Rebecca changed her name, that we've been asking for a while, and I still don't have quite 100% clarity on that. Then we get to the morning and Kate and Toby. We'll get to Kate and Toby later. Kate, Randall, and Kevin are having breakfast and are talking and kind of going over like everyone getting back to their norm. That was actually a really nice moment between the three of them. Like it was very lighthearted. You know, Randall's very like playfully congratulating Kevin on wrapping up his show. It was really nice to see them have that moment where they're not at odds. And actually it bookends the end of the show. So I thought that was really nice. But then they start talking about what's going to happen with Rebecca. And I do think that it was a little naive for Kevin to say, hey, we have a plan. This house was the plan. Like a house is not a plan. A house is a location. Someone has to take care of Rebecca, and someone whose family does need to be in proximity in case the aide needs something or needs information. It's not just having a full-time aide and that aide and that being okay. That aide is going to have breaks, is going to need to be able to go spend time with her family, and there needs to be someone nearby. And so I think that was naive of Kevin to assume that only building the house was sufficient. And Randall points that out and says this was not the plan. Now this of course sets up the idea that Randall and Kevin are always at odds and Kate is kind of silent. But I do think that getting into the rest of the show, like all three of them are right. Like a house alone is not a plan, but Randall is right that someone from the family needs to be with her frequently, especially with now Miguel being gone. She needs someone there who's going to know her and know what she needs. But one thing is very clear, everyone loves the location because Kevin's family comes in and they're there. They're going to go up to the Poconos, and Madison and Eli are there with the kids. And how cute is their little boy? I was like, okay, he's so adorable. And Edie and Nikki are there and they love the place. And Philip comes in with coffee and it's like, this is the best coffee ever. The foreshadowing of the writers, the foreshadowing is just chef's kiss. I already talked a little bit about the flashback of Rebecca picking the kids up from the party and how all of that goes down. And really you just see how things play out with like constantly Kevin doing something that kind of is like a mess up, Randall having to fix it, and Kate kind of being in the middle. And that's just been like their MO for most of their life. And I think the purpose of that scene is just to remind us of their motivations. Like they have changed and grown as characters, but their motivations, especially as it pertains to their mom, are established from those early years, where from that moment then on, Kevin is constantly wanting to prove to his mom that he's not a screw up. Kate is constantly fighting for Rebecca to see her, and really to see her with her limitations. But I think Kate is wrong, and I think Toby is right, and so is Rebecca. Like, she feels as though Rebecca has this idealized version of her, but I think Rebecca's always known who her daughter was. I think just Kate doubted herself, and she needed someone in her life to constantly remind her of her greatness. And so it was great, that moment that comes later on in the show. We'll talk about that later. But in that moment, that's what I got from her conversation with Rebecca, was she wanted Rebecca and Jack to see her as she feels like she is. And yeah, they have an idealized version of their daughter, but also they are aware of their daughter's potential. And you have to have someone in your life who can tell you that you can aspire to great heights. Always. The therapy cat, Kate pulls out this therapy cat, and it's like, we're going to use this as like our talking stick or whatever. That lasted all of 2 seconds. She's like, here's this therapy cat I bought from mom, and whoever's holding the cat gets to talk. That went out the door. That cat was in the middle of that table, and everybody was running their mouth and talking, and nobody was touching that cat. That cat did not work for those purposes. That cat was purchased for Rebecca to have something to take care of, and that's all that cat is good for, because no one was paying that cat any mind. We have the moment where Beth, earlier in the episode, Beth comes in with Philip and Sophie and sees the tension between the three and is like, I'm going to take them down to the cabin. Y'all going to sit here, have your piercing feelings, hash things out, and we'll see y'all later. And then we get the moment in the cabin where Beth is just always 10 for 10. She knows what's going on. She's been with this family for 30 years. And when she starts acting out, how Randall is going through the emotions of like wanting his mom to move in with them, and how he's, talking to Kevin about, she's our mother, Kevin. Like, it was so in Sterling's voice. I really hope that they have an opportunity to work together again, because I think they have just such great on-screen chemistry, and they feel like they are family to each other. Like, it feels like it's authentic and they're authentically family, and I love it. But then Alexandra, Sophie, she didn't miss any beats. She comes in as Kevin, and it's like, I know, Randall, don't you think I know she's our mother? And I was like, the writers they've really harnessed in on how these characters relate to each other and how they've been writing for them. And I think that was great. Poor Philip, he doesn't know what's going on. This is the danger of bringing someone new in so late into the show, because he doesn't really have a full grasp of the dynamic of the family, and he feels like an outsider. And it's a little interesting because so early on in the show, we dealt with Toby feeling like an outsider, and now we're kind of feeling or witnessing Philip kind of not get the vibe of the family. And we've already been with that with Toby. And I feel like this episode, I know what the writers were doing, but I really do feel like this episode just doubled down for me the fact that I don't feel like there's any chemistry between Philip and Kate should be with Toby. Nobody gets her the way that Toby does. And aside from the fact that they weren't really supporting each other in their dreams and making space for each other in their dreams, they get each other. And I think Toby did want to support her. I just think, again, this episode makes me think really so much of what we were seeing between Kate and Toby was Kate not being able to handle someone having such big vision for themselves and in her, and she didn't have space enough to have a dream that was big enough for both her and Toby's dreams. And Toby didn't have the vision to help her, give her at the moment of what her dreams could be. And this episode just made me feel that all the more. We go back to Kate and Rebecca's conversation when teenage Kate, when she tells Kate, Rebecca, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. I was like, girl, you are brutal. Like, you are not, like, the self-doubt. I mean, I get it. I see it in students all the time. I felt it in myself, but it's really sad. There's a whole tooth fairy thing. Again, I feel like all of the flashbacks are just showing us the ways in which Rebecca relates to her 3 kids, the way that their personalities relate to each other. You've got Randall, who is the realist. Rebecca can tell him the truth about the tooth fairy. Kevin, who is like the believer. He's always like dreaming of clouds and sunshine and rainbows and almost overestimating what's possible and not grounding it in reality. And then Kate, who's just kind of somewhere in the middle. Like, she wants to believe in Kevin's clouds and rainbows, but she has a little bit where she's able to see Randall. There's always a character, I feel like, in TV who is the one who sees things. For the longest time in the show, I think it was Beth who could see things. But I think more and more it's becoming Kate, where she can see what's in. I think really all of the moms, like Rebecca has it at times too, where they have that sixth sense where they're able to see things and see into the other characters, into the other people, what they need. And so it's nice to see that Kate is developing that sense, especially since Rebecca is going to be gone. The most relatable moment of the night for me was flashback to Rebecca trying to put baby Kate to sleep and then taking baby Kate in the room with her to watch TV, and then she falls asleep and baby Kate ends up on the floor. Y'all, I did that to one of my kids. Luckily, he was okay. It was carpeted floor. He didn't fall far. It wasn't on the bed. It was like I was in the chair, rocking chair, and I passed out. And he slid and hit the floor, and he was okay. I mean, he's like grown now, but like we don't really think about. It was so sad seeing Rebecca like having to deal with like being by herself with like 3 kids and not having help. Like we really don't think about like how taxing being a mother is. Being a parent, but being a mother especially is on your body, to where like it was just such a relatable thing. Like we expect mothers to be perfect, but they're human. And then she has 3 kids. I can't even imagine. We flashed into the cabin where you have Beth and Philip are there, and you know Philip is kind of asking Sophie and Beth how it's been being a Pearson, and Beth is basically like, you know, it's been a burden and a blessing, and he's like, which one is more? And then he kind of like claps back a little bit at Beth because he feels like she's being negative and he wants her to be positive and he wants her to have belief in Kate. It was actually a nice moment, even though I was kind of irritated by Phil, because I was like, bro, you just got here. Like, I'm going to need you to back down off of my girl. But I do think that because Beth is someone who sees everyone a little bit better, she did need to be reminded of that so that she could kind of take that to Randall and help kind of ground him. Rebecca comes out with her makeup done, and it is very garish looking, very kind of clownish looking. And it was so sad. Another cry moment for me, because Randall is like, that's not our mother. Our mother was magic. And then Kevin agrees. Like they're both just so shocked at like how far she's kind of declining. And they've only ever seen Rebecca like looking perfectly. And so to see this is jarring to them. Kate is the only one who can still see her mother there and see the care that she needs. But it was a heartbreaking moment, and so many people were talking about like they've had those similar moments, and I have not had those moments yet. My parents are still fairly young, but it was heart-wrenching to see that moment, and just to see like all jokes aside, like somebody please give Mandy Moore an Emmy. Like please give Mandy Moore an Emmy. Try to say that, Mandy Moore an Emmy, because like she is just playing the snot out of this role, like literally. Kate calls Toby to check on the kids, and then Toby gives her the advice, which is kind of similar to what Rebecca's always said, which is that she can do this, she can handle things. Rebecca chose her for a reason. She just needs to boss up and do it and trust herself. But then at the end of it all, when she thanks him, he's like, okay, should we talk about getting together? Now, it's a joke, but like, I hate y'all writers. I hate y'all for doing that to us, because y'all know how we feel. We want Kate and Toby together. So for y'all to even throw that line in there, like y'all suck. I hate y'all in the best possible way. Eventually Beth does talk to Randall and helps him to see that his siblings have changed, that Kevin has matured and grown up. He's not still the script he was as a teenager, and that Kate is stronger than he thinks she is, that she doesn't always need her brother. She's had to deal with these 2 big egos, and she's stronger than even she thinks, and they just need to give her space to live in that. I kind of wish Beth had said that to Randall and Kevin the night that her and Toby had that fight. That would have been useful information to have then. And then we get some more answers about what we're going to get next week, which is Kevin talking about this idealized lazy Saturday where they would play pin to tail on the donkey, play Foursquare. So now we know why why Rebecca had to bring the pin, the tail, and the donkey game, and why they needed the sidewalk chalk because they're going to play Foursquare and pin, the tail, and the donkey. If you guys ever watched the show with the Bravermans, Parenthood, this is going to end. I'm calling it now. This is going to end like that show. That show ended with them playing a baseball game right after they scatter their father's ashes to kind of like celebrate his life. This show is going to end with the family outside playing Foursquare, pin the tail, and the donkey. I'm calling it right now. That's how this show is going to end, so that we're ending with like this bittersweet, but very more sweet than bitter ending. I'm calling it right now. So you guys heard it here, pin it right here. Okay. And then Kate figures out what to do with Rebecca. She's like, I'm going to be the one to make the decision. The last 8 minutes of the show are the best 8 minutes of the show. To me, the family meeting of the show wasn't the first 35 minutes of the show. It's these last 8 minutes of the show where finally the whole family is meeting. And I think that has been one of the downfalls to how the show is played out. Is so often the spouses and the other people impacted by family decisions are left out. And that happens so often in real life. And when those things impact everyone needs to come to the table. They finally have a true family meeting. And we get cut into that. We get Jack and Rebecca finding out that they're pregnant, Rebecca being overwhelmed, and Jack saying, it's just one baby. There's two of us and just one baby. We can handle it. Of course, we know it wasn't just one baby. It was 3 babies. But they still were able to handle it. And the big three can handle their one mother. And so Kevin says, I'm going to finish out the Manny, come back here to move and live. So I'll be in the house. Nikki and Edie are like, we're here. We'll help out. Kate is like, well, what about your kids? What about Madison and Eli? And Eli's like, well, my family, she's like, Eli's family lives in New Jersey. We'd be closer to his family. We only were really staying here because of Kevin. So we'll move close by too, so he'll be able to see the kids. So now we know that Kevin is going to live in the house. He and Sophie are going to live in the house. They're going to relocate there. Madison and Eli are going to move nearby. So that's why the kids are able to be there so quickly. Kate is still living in California, which is one of the reasons why her and Philip are not there whenever everyone else first arrives. Hopefully they will get there in time. How tragic would that be if they weren't? Toby is able to fly out. He flies out. Obviously he flies out. Unless he was in a hotel doing something. That might be why we didn't see him with his wife in the time jump. Maybe they're going to explain like he was in New York or something on business. That would be a great way to fix that, because that scene always looked like he was alone. And if he was in a hotel on business, that would make so much more sense. And then they solve everything. All 3 of them working together. That moment where Randall shakes Kevin's hand, and it's such a pivotal moment because he's finally like able to pass on some of the burden of being the person who takes care of the family, which he's always been. And I do think that Kate saying, this is the reason why it's 3 of us, because we were all needed for this. Hopefully that reminds the fans to not look at Randall's actions as being douchey or mean. He's just always had to be the one. Rebecca always trusted him to be the one to take charge. And when you've operated in that way in your life for 40 years, it's kind of hard to dial that back. Kevin has finally come to be a grown-up and is acting mature and making good decisions, and is in a place where he can financially do that, and has, the family situation that allows him to do that. Because otherwise it would, if Madison and Eli weren't able to move, it would be irresponsible for him to leave his family and go so far away. And Rebecca does need family there all the time. And Kate is the medical power of attorney, so she needs to be the one making the call, but really it needed to be all of them making the call because it's impacting all of them. So I thought that the way the show ended with like the montage of them all going in and taking care of Rebecca. Oh, I didn't even bring up the fact that like when Kate told them, that they didn't see their mom. And then she takes him in the room and has Randall brushing Rebecca's hair and Kevin putting lotion on her hands, like boo-hoo tears, crying out, like crying. That was just such a beautiful moment of the night. And then the montage of all of them reading to Rebecca at various stages, and then Rebecca having read to them as babies throughout the whole episode. Beautiful, beautiful chef's kiss. And then we get to the end of the episode, which brings us to our final time jump, which is somewhere, I want to say ballpark of like 2028, although it's a little bit rough because Kate's wedding was 3 years. And then I feel like about 2 years have passed since then, so it's been 5 years. So Kate's wedding was like 2025, 2 years will be 2027, maybe an additional like 3 years have gone by, 3 or more years have gone by, so maybe it's like 2030. We don't really know. I feel like we don't really know unless they've said it, so let me know down below if you've seen it said anywhere. So the next 2 episodes are going to deal with the end, and I suspect that because the next episode is called The Train, perhaps we're going to see Rebecca as a young girl on that train with her father, the parts of the train ride that we weren't able to hear. Perhaps we will see other family members taking trains in order to come to see Rebecca, maybe Deja and Malik. I hope we get caught up with that in some way, shape, or form, with whatever's going on with that. And we'll get the family saying their goodbyes to Rebecca. So I guess the final question is just, are you guys ready for the last 2 episodes of This Is Us? Because I am not. Y'all, I completely lied. This video was not shorter than I wanted it to be, but it's okay because I love y'all and y'all love me. So I'm going to wrap things up right now by saying, if you haven't done so already, click that subscribe button down below, and I will see you guys next week, hopefully for a much shorter video. Until then, toodles.